Alright guys, what is up? It's Aniki here. I just read the official Viz release after obviously I always read the scan so you guys don't spoil everything for me. But just read the official Viz release. I'm loving the way this chapter is. It's interesting because the front half of the chapter is very far more oriented towards the action. Oh yeah, we're getting straight into this. I very seldom. I guess I could start asking you guys how your days are going, but like I feel like you come here to not talk to about that stuff. So whatever. Point is, let's go. So we see like Redestro try to amp it up to 100% stress, and Shigaraki just straight up wipes the attack out before it's even like actually out here. He's just, actually, never mind. I'm not going to conduct that experiment right now. But you see him just races everything, and even says to him, like that attack is powerful and all, but the fact that I can destroy it before it even connects, it's important because in the fan lations they're like, oh, if I get it before you swing, he's like, no, 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 the margin is before it hits me. You can swing all you want, but I'm still gonna destroy the attack, so it doesn't matter. And I implore you to look at the Viz art because when you see the fallout from the attack that he launched, even though it got destroyed, it is insane. Like the amount of splash damage that Redestro is actually capable of putting out, even before amping himself, is actually pretty high tier. This guy was leveling like multiple city blocks. I'd said that in the previous video, but when you get to see the angle from that first person perspective, and the thing about that is, it's especially important to realize that he is achieving this with the attack being objectively nerfed. The mass, the material that he launches in the attack, this is literally just the force of the wind from the throw of the mass that he was trying to throw at Shigaraki. This is not the full damage or scaling of this ability. We are talking about somebody who's potentially very easily city level. That's all I'm saying. And one of the things that we hadn't really talked about is how, if you look at Shigaraki's left foot, actually, when you progress, he's kind of missing some toes. Hey, buddy. Uh, I hadn't noticed that until just now, but he is actually missing, or not just now, earlier or the other day I noticed. But hey, all right, there you go. Apollo's going that way. So, uh, yeah, so he's missing fingers, he's missing toes, and he's still standing. Shigaraki is going to the wall right now. And the thing is that I've seen people talk about it if you're on Twitter, the way his hair has been drawn throughout the duration of the arc between like the little strands of dark lines, and now we get like this holy white visage, this reaper of death visage, where now he's got the long black cloak. He's not covered in hands. There's blood everywhere. He's missing digits and finger body parts, and he's got just white snow hair, like just pure, just the visual of this is just him free coming towards you. And then like the thing is, you see Redestro's panicking. He doesn't get it. He's like freaking out. And we finally get to see what his Detonaratco like thing is, and he's basically the Hulk wearing the Hulkbuster armor. And at this point, Shigaraki is just kind of like laughing at him. He now looks down upon Redestro. He's like, oh yeah. He straight up says to him in the viz, "You're in a tight spot." He's telling him, no, 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 no. At this point, you don't know what to do, right? Like you're lost. And like he Redestro claims that his quirk is to liberate the people. That's what he's there for. And Shigaraki just doesn't care about that stuff. And we get like a small flashback to when he was a child, and I guess the Metal Liberation Army found him and was like, "Hey, like we want you. We know like, through the generations we've been preserving, we've been making it a point to be there for you." Also, Redestro got multiple double spreads this chapter, or like just wide spreads, huge, just panels dedicated to his motion, the way he's like fighting, his armor, which is Horikoshi hasn't been drawing robots a lot lately, so I think he kind of just wanted to take this opportunity to flex because I'm looking at this like right now and it is glorious. Uh, and we see like the League of Villains like slowly moving towards like trying to regroup. Twice has clones carrying them while they're holding his broken arms, while two of the other ones are carrying Toga. Uh, Gigantomachia is on his way nonstop, not even the slightest bit worried about whether or not this is Apollo down here, so worried about anybody. He's just going in, which is the kind of content I like to see actually. Like just Redestro, like Machia going for Redestro, going for Shigaraki. This is what we said he was gonna do. He's delivering. I like when like the expectations are being hit, and not only that though, but like Gigantomachia is a threat. and it was stated like Shigaraki was like he just has too much HP. He's a big deal, but like the League of Villains is definitely superior to these foot soldiers. They've all picked up multiple bodies, just racking them up. And so when you factor that in, it makes sense that all these guys are getting blasted away even faster, even easier than like the League of Villains were against Gigantomachia. But it doesn't matter if all of them have all these, like some of these have these ranged attacks. You see people launching what look like energy beams. So even though it feels like, you know, on the surface Gigantomachia is untouched, I still think he is technically taking damage. He's still being hit. Like it might not break his AC, but like there's still some, as it's called in the tabletop, Mist Runner, stamina wounds. He's still taking hits to his stamina. He's still, you know, struggling. Like he's got to be taking some damage. Like I don't think he's just completely fine unless they absolutely never ever 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 ever, ever really did any real damage to him. But I don't see that happening. Um, Sorry, I was out till 3 last night. Well, I wasn't out till 3. I was up until 3. I was out. I was still out pretty late. Whatever. My friend turned 30. Shout out to Saya. Anyway, I don't know why I did that, but I'm keeping it in the video because I'm not cutting it out. I like the honest long take. We've all noticed this by now, I'm sure. Look at them. Okay, anyway. Apollo's over there being cute. So, Mr. Compress tries to negotiate with the doctor to, you know, get them all teleported out of there because the situation's turning into a big mess. Doctor tells him no, but also explains that he believes that this is exactly the situation that Shigaraki needs to grow, and that's why, as All For One's successor, he's still willing to let him be within this dangerous situation because he's like, hey, you know, this is exactly what my boy needs in order to grow, become stronger, be more worthy of being the successor of All For One. So, we get Gatan straight up leaving his fight with Dabi, by the way. Like that, the amount of effort people are putting to get to the fight, the main event, is really important because you see Gatan just straight up leave. He hops on his ice, he's flying towards him, he's like apologizing. You get the flashback to Redestro essentially saying that Gatan is their key player. He's the only one who can take on Dabi. He has to do it. Even though that's not entirely true because if Redestro had pulled up on Dabi and used Burden, I don't think Dabi's getting up. So I think he could have handled it, but I think it's important to not have him be on the front line, so it makes sense. But he even apologized. You can tell that they do have an actual relationship. One of the things worth noting that I hadn't seen a lot of people talk about is that Spinner managed to grab a hold of the truck that Trumpet or Hanabata was on so that he could get towards the fight too. So Spinner is literally holding onto the back of a truck right now, midair, on his way to the fight with Gigantomachia and Shigaraki and Redestro. You have Gigantomachia, boom, on his way. You have Mr. Compress converging on him. Everybody is moving. This is very reminiscent of the last round of the joint training arc, where if you remember, everybody was trying to regroup. So you had, you know, Twin Impact Guy, Emily, Rule, or Yanagi or Poltergeist or whatever. They were there. Then you had Mina and Mineta in one area. Then you had Uraraka moving towards them to converge on that. You had Deku fighting Shinso. Like all these people like coming together. You know, we're getting towards the end of the arc. This is the climax of the the conflict between these two factions. Everybody's coming together. We still have a couple people benched. It's the same way that we had like Monoma sitting out. The person who can copy somebody else's quirk is sitting out. So there's like little heart like throwbacks even to the context of the joint training arc where My Villain Academia is really like them going through an accelerated experience of what the students have lived within the past year. The My Villain Academia, the League of Villains, they're essentially living and going through this all within the span of a period of 2 months where they're having to do all this hardcore training like to make up for the classes that they never got or missed. And then you've got them doing that. You have this ridiculous high stakes kidnapping, like in the same way that Bakugo was kidnapped for the students. They don't have an All For One though, but they do have a heavy hitter that's arriving that's supposed to be clutch, like All Might or All For One level, that's just coming in here to destroy a bunch of things. Except on this case, since he's a villain, he's also a liability to them, and they have to prove themselves to him while at the same time also taking out the Meta Liberation Army, not dying to any of these factions, come out ahead, destroy Deka City, make it out of there, and build the City of Villains, which I do believe is coming after this, because The idea that Shigaraki and them can just walk into a city and start destroying things now means that there's going to be villains, more villains who want to come to them, more villains who want to be on their side. The Meta Liberation Army will probably have some holdovers that really want to join up with them, and especially because, as I've been telling you, Horikoshi has finally on panel once again, deciding that, hey, I'm going to establish this thing, had Redestro understand Shigaraki because of his quirk, because of who he is. He is the free one. He is liberated. He is the one that's like embodying what the Liberation Army is about to the degree. But seeing Redestro realize this, it even affects his power level. His stress levels start dropping because at the end of the day, he's starting to realize that no, I do not have a reason to be targeting him. I cannot go after him. He is exactly what I say I profess, what I claim to believe. He is the embodiment of my ideals. If anything, at this point, Shigaraki has, instead of being, when he shows up, he says the return of the future king, he's established his kingdom here. We've been talking a lot about Deca City going down and like the terrorist organization and all these other things. But what if Deca City becomes Villain City? Like, yeah, he's destroyed a lot of it, but if they rebuild, if they have like these military, essentially a military under their command, if Redestro was like Shigaraki, because when you look at the symbolism, he looks to be like a savior figure almost with the white hair, the flowing robes. There's a distinct parallel, the way that, to a certain degree, emotionally, like Redestro was kind of bowing to him at this point. Like, he's like, this dude is liberated. That's what this feeling is. The sensation that he's been having and been struggling with throughout the last back half of this conflict, it's been stemming from the fact that he's realizing that Shigaraki is a person who everything he touches can be destroyed by his very hands, is in fact embodying the idea of that destruction by not caring about the future, by throwing it all away, by destroying everything and only caring about right now, making sure that he's like satisfied. At the end of the day, Shigaraki's making sure he doesn't itch. That's what Shigaraki's doing. He's making sure, essentially, to keep his disease in check. His illness, as Overhaul said, quirks are a disease. If every time somebody made you mad, you got ridiculously itchy, you would probably want to kill people, actually. And here's why I can say that pretty comfortably. I grew up, had a lot of eczema symptoms, and so, like, throughout 4th through 6th grade, like, my entire arm, I would be, like, cracked. Because it would be like dry and like I'd be like just scratching it up the whole time, and so I wore long sleeve shirts for like 2-3 years straight, year round, just to make sure that I wasn't dealing with like as much itching, so nobody could see it. It's just an extremely frustrating thing to constantly want to like rip your skin off, and if you have an ability that makes it where just because something's going wrong, you feel that way, it gets really intense. So, hold on. I need to go check on something. Apollo just freaked out. Where did I put the mouse? Oh, found it. So, anyway, sorry about that. But one of the things that I think is important is that not only Shigaraki, but like Redestro acknowledging this, but there's a certain look of, I can't tell if it's fear, shock, or admiration on Gyanto Makia's face. So we see his face, and then we see the close-up of the face of Redestro as he's like looking at what Shigaraki's about to do, and we just see him like unleash this huge attack. We don't know what's going on. This giant kanji to let us know things are getting pretty shaky. So I'm expecting like a leveling of at least multiple city blocks from Shigaraki off of this, and that alone might be enough to impress Gigato Makia, because he needs to see him display power. I don't think he necessarily needs him to beat him, but I know he needs to see his power. And so in that regard, I could see that Giganto Makia could accept him off of this, though I think that would be considered a little unsatisfying for some, where you would rather see like Giganto Makia actually beaten. But I think for what Giganto Makia's status is and for the kind of power that Shigaraki has, I think part of Giganto Makia is going to realize that at the end of the day, Shigaraki could not fight him directly. He could not use his quirk to fight him. He was fighting a guy off of pure physicals, because if he ever actually managed to lay a blow or a touch on him with all 5 fingers, he was going to start turning to dust. Shigaraki literally could not fight him properly. And so Giganto Makia may take that into account and be like, all right, he might not physically be able to just knock me out, but if he ever so much as touches me, I'm probably going to die. That's respectable. Like, the idea of somebody just being able to off you kind of can seal the deal. One of the things that I especially appreciated this chapter, though, was Shigaraki, after like he's been in this situation. He's been constantly like, yeah, I need to kill people. I need to do this. You can see that when they say he's liberated, he's genuinely like more relaxed. He's like calm. He's making jokes. He even asked Redestro if he's gonna go plus ultra on him. Like the idea of Shigaraki making fun of the phrase plus ultra is kind of like tongue in cheek because if you think about it, he's at this point Redestro is no longer like he's willing to think about other opponents while fighting Redestro. He's essentially like, oh yeah, plus ultra, like Endeavor, like All Might, like Deku, like these people who are completely irrelevant to this situation. Do you know how in your bag you gotta be to start like that? Like that is a flex. Destroying his attacks. He's been flex. He flexed this entire chapter. Like this entire chapter is Shig flex, but also I think a lot of people were sleeping on him. And the thing that I like most about this, even though a lot of people don't like it, I like the fact that this isn't an awakening, as in his quirk is awakening, but rather he's um, liberating himself, freeing himself, like holding himself back less. I much prefer this route to people being able to just get random power boosts due to their stressors, especially because that's not what this is. So what that means is that so far nobody's actually going to get gotten that we know of a power boost specifically just off of emotion, unless you count the adrenaline rush that is a natural biological response that you can sometimes get that overclocks your body that Deku got versus muscular. But as far as their quirk magically being able to do something different, there is no on-panel example of that actually happening mid-combat. Toga directly denies that that's what happened. We see that Shigaraki was using his quirk in a suppressed fashion. Uh, you have the commentary about Gaten controlling the ice. I personally think quirks need to start being thought of more in line as like stands. Not that they are stands per se, but rather just because a quirk's ability is like hydrokinesis doesn't mean you should think of it as like, oh, he's just gonna manipulate the water outside. Like for all you know, they could do like some Dead Man Wonderland stuff and like because of the water and the blood and just make blades out of that. And then like you'd be like, whoa, like that's technically like blood control, but no, technically it's still part of hydrokinesis because it's water within blood. Da 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 da. Like start thinking about the ways in which things can get a little insane or like goofy, but still fit within the context of what that word actually means. Like with transformation, being able to turn into the cellular level was important, and being changing on a genetic level is reminiscent and like necessary to become that person. You can't say I am them and then only have like their aesthetic down. That's not what that means. The ability to become another person is to become them physically all the way down to the DNA. And that, my friends, is why it's imperative to understand that these quirks, the awakening thing isn't what's been happening. It's all about your understanding of your quirk. The control ice, why wouldn't you be able to make it colder if you can control it? You can vibrate, you can make it go faster. If you move it around fast enough, it's going to start melting. Why wouldn't you be able to keep the ice at a stable temperature? Hell, when you think about it, when he's manipulating ice, the fact that it's not melting on a sunny day naturally means that he was always controlling the temperature of the ice. He was keeping it a stable, like as soon as he grabbed it, he's like, this is what this ice is now. That's how it worked. It's just that until then, you didn't really get to think about it that way. Perspective is kind of everything. Perspective is everything and nothing, both in real life and in fiction. It's important to realize that, yes, how you view things will impact how you go about things, but that does not necessarily mean how you view things is how things are. If, for example, if you read Vigilantes, Captain Celebrity just thought his power was flight, then he would only be flying around and he would never try to carry other people. But because he paid attention to how his abilities actually worked, he realized that he could create like a barrier that would keep out the wind. It was basically like a tactile telekinesis sort of thing. And that is a completely different power than just flight. It's also not actually super strength, and that's important to realize too. And so having these setups where Shigaraki is like learning how to use his quirk by propagating through the ground, I fully could see Redestro trying to submit here, or possibly him saying something along the lines of whichever one of us wins is the one who deserves to lead the army, and like pushing that as like this is the true agenda, this is the true test of liberation, this is the true test of ideals. Let's see who embodies the Meta Liberation Army more. And if Shigaraki, or like if, because we do see him essentially bowing, like giving up, understanding that Shigaraki's liberated, his spirit has already surrendered. That's why his stress levels are dropping. He's not mad about Shigaraki anymore. He's just not. And so a twist that I think would be interesting is like the Meta Liberation Army kneeling to the League of Villains to a certain degree, and that's how we would get the villain city, where it would slowly like used for villainy, slowly farming up like these vile, disgusting people, and then like you get like essentially a true war from within the country due to the Meta Liberation Army's numbers, but then the League of Villains' influence and embodiment of what the Liberation Army is truly about. Where having to deal with like 50,000 people, or that also just makes for a good arc where literally the good guys have to go into a city and like deal with whether they're having to like fight different villains or like different people within the Liberation Army. This also allows for rebellious sectors to build within that. So you'd have some people within the villain city that were actually good guys but really didn't want to be, and da da da. And so then you'd have the potential of an arc that takes place within Deka, but it's literally inside of a city run by villains, lived by villains, essentially treated as its own entity, and nobody, even in Japan, is really willing to touch it because what Endeavor's gonna go there? What if Endeavor dies? Like if there's all these like high level villains now where it's a real threat where they could potentially declare autonomy and then have a completely different like function to how that nation was running. So the idea that we could potentially get a villain society, though I don't know or necessarily believe that that's what's going to happen, I do want to point out that there's a possibility the story pieces are there for us to get the villain city that Twice kind of joked about. And when you think about the way Twice joked about, oh, is this like a villain city? And then you also had to talk about the prophet and religion, and then we had the parallels between modern or like Catholicism and some of the Meta Liberation Army's ideals with the focus of the mother, the Redestro being like the father of the movement, essentially the mother of quirks, the father of the movement, the holy mother, the father. But then you would have the son, the chosen one, who Shigaraki appears to be in this case, who's come to actually manifest those ideals as the child of destruction who lives to destroy. He does in fact also destroy the barriers holding back society and stopping people from being able to use their meta abilities freely. That is something you could look at it as like from Meta Liberation Army religious text perspective. Shigaraki's the way he lives makes him practically the embodiment of everything they want and is essentially the child of salvation for them. So I'm going to leave that video here. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe. You guys know how the whole YouTube song and dance algorithm try to get promoted. I'm almost at 100 subscribers, so it would kind of be nice if this is the video that like helps me get pushed past that, and we can start moving on towards bigger goals, like maybe 200 subs, 250 or something like that. I don't know if I'm going to do the special for 100. I had an idea in my head, so I'll see if I can get some. There's just some little stuff that I need to do behind the scenes that if I get taken care of, I think I know exactly what I want to do for celebrating 100 subs when I finally reach that goal. So like I said, you guys have a wonderful day. Enjoy your weekends or the end of your weekend. Try to have a positive work week. I'm going to keep hanging out with Apollo and watching this documentary on Netflix called Taco Chronicles, even though it's making me hungry as hell. Have a wonderful day. Anaki out.